Hi everyone and welcome to another edition of Between the Lines Live. I'm here on the Gold Coast and spending some time with some of the guys that are from up here just to talk about what's going on in this Gold Coast market, a market that's certainly been thriving and seeing an awful lot of population growth over the last couple of years. So I'm joined by Matthew Fritzsche. He is the Director of RW Special Projects. So thank you, Matthew. And we've got Luke Boulden. Luke is the Head of Commercial for RWC Gold Coast. So thank you, Luke. Okay, so let's get stuck in. There's an awful lot to talk about in this market. Obviously, the Southeast Queensland Regional Plan has been up for review, and then we've got the SEQ shaping document that's out at the moment. So I'll probably start with you, Matt. So can you explain a little bit about what Special Projects does and kind of where you sit and why something like this plan is so important to what you guys do?
Yeah, so Special Projects as a business obviously sits within the commercial network. We specialise in the sale of development sites and specialised property assets throughout Queensland and northern New South Wales. So we do everything from high density sites in the metro areas throughout southeast Queensland through to broadacre land, so everything from townhouses to subdivision sites, land lease communities, etc.
And you're a local Gold Coastian, what's the term? Is there a term?
A Gold Coaster? Yeah, Coastie, yeah, that's right. So I was born and raised and grew up on the Gold Coast. And we've obviously seen a hell of a lot of activity on the Gold Coast over the last few years.
So a lot of projects that you're working on, a lot of subdivisions, and what have you seen? Like the resi market's obviously seen a huge change over, more recently, but over the longer term. In that development site space, what are some of the key takeaways for Gold Coast?
Yeah, so just going back a step, I guess, just talking about the shaping SEQ document. So that's a statutory document which talks to the growth, I guess, of southeast Queensland over the medium to longer term. Mm-hmm. We're going towards from a population of a current population in SEQ that sits around 3.5 million with a projected population. I think it's about 5.3 million into 2040 odd. So we've got a huge amount of population, both domestically, particularly that comes from the southern states, particularly Sydney and Melbourne, but also internationally as well. So that document, I guess, talks to population control and how that's going to work over southeast Queensland. It talks to infrastructure and it talks to, I guess, zoning and how it looks to accommodate that as well. As part of the shaping SEQ doc, it seems that the major focus is not on expansion of greenfield land, it's rather consolidation, I guess, in our urban centres.
Yes. I think the term was gentle. What was it?
Oh yeah, so you have that gentle densification. So you have that as well. So so I guess if we're talking about the Gold Coast specifically, there is very little greenfield land left, if you like. There's some areas in the northern Gold Coast region with some patches, I guess, for urban expansion, but very little. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the consolidation will probably be, concentrated along our beachfront. All the way from the north through to Coolangatta, if you like. In addition to that, consolidation, if you like, then there's the public transport, health, and the facilities, I guess the community infrastructure that sits around that. Mm-hmm. So what we have seen, I guess, over the last few years, particularly, through the pandemic, is a lot of activity, particularly in the medium and high density space. Okay. So there's been a lot of new development, if you like, along that spine of the coastal spine of the Gold Coast. And that activity, look, it remains strong, but we have seen it, probably soften a little bit in response to a more difficult construction market.
Yeah, well, we've definitely got to talk about construction costs because that's something that's affecting, commercial residential sectors of the market. What we might do is, I want to get back to that, but you mentioned health, so I might just jump to that. Luke, I know that you do a lot of work in that kind of health sector and the kind of medical area, something that's growing in need, I suppose, not just of interest from investors, but just in need, because we have this strong population growth. Like you said, the interstate migration has been huge over the last couple of years. You've sold quite a lot of medical assets, transacting. What can you see happening in that part of the market?
Yeah, I think my finger on the pulse from my aspect is more or less on the leasing capacity side of things. Look, there is certainly a very strong appetite from investors, both private, small, medium, and your larger instos for your healthcare backed or your medical assets. I think there's there's a lot of confidence around it. You support we are a growing region. The migration into southeast Queensland has been impressive over recent years, and thrown into the mix, obviously that's been generated by the COVID pandemic, but at the same time, obviously that was a health scare around the world, and it's probably triggered a piece for people to be more conscious of health in the same sense as well.
Yes.
We have seen a massive emergence of healthcare providers growing in southeast Queensland, but more predominantly here on the Gold Coast. You've got EDQ that are really trying to push the Health and Knowledge Precinct, or Lumina. They do suggest. So you've got Nicofredis or Nikon that are now getting close to moving on a 10,000 square metre building out there, which is very much health, life science, med tech, research focused. And then you've got Evans Long that have done Proxima out there, another 10 square metre building, and they pre-committed a sale to Homeco for circa 80 million, I think it was, a couple of years ago. So that just proves that there's a major appetite for it on that larger scale, but even on the smaller, the micro scales too. Your emergence of your medical hubs. I've just recently project managed a rather extensive radiology clinic, 1,200 plus square metres, and on the back end of that, we've created 400 square metres of specialty space within that component. Okay. And we've replicated another project very similar to that down in Burleigh as well, where we have just got a rather extensive commitment from a multinational brand too. So
I think that medical, like we did a Between the Lines live a few months ago on medical, and I think just that space of what that looks like has certainly changed. That kind of integrated facilities where it's your one-stop shop, if you like, for all things medical. It's certainly we've seen it across the country, but we haven't seen the demand slow at all. There's so much interest in that sector.
And from a landlord's perspective too, as well, that you've got the security of a tenant.
Oh yeah.
Banks are throwing money at doctors as well. I think they're lending at 100% at the minute as well. And you're getting immediate rental uplift as well. Your office rates versus your medical or your healthcare approved spaces. Same delivery per se, you could be looking at $100 a square metre difference.
Yeah. Okay. So that's medical. I just find that so interesting, and it really feeds into that whole population piece, like we said, and the housing. But let's just jump tack for a second. And Luke, another question to you is: we saw last month the release of the office market report, and I'm always such a massive supporter of Gold Coast when I talk about office markets. Your best performing office market in the country. It's kind of maintained again this period. Yay, go Gold Coast. 6.3% vacancy. Take up, particularly, you've got a small prime market. Understand that it is a small prime market, but your take up in that prime side of things have been, quite impressive. Not much vacancy at all if you're finding something. So tell me, how has that come about? And it doesn't seem that long ago that vacancy was, was in the teens. It's come back rather swiftly. Again, COVID helped a lot of that. We saw a lot of businesses come from other states and open up. So what's your take on the office market as at now?
Look, we are going from strength to strength. And I think a lot of that can be attested to those migration rates to southeast Queensland. Throw into the mix the affordability as well. I think our prime grade, 50 Capital Avenue, that's our prominent building. We're nudging, I think, just under 650 square metre gross on that now. So your comparative buildings in Brisbane or Sydney, you're looking at double that.
Yeah.
So on an affordability basis, we're leagues ahead in that sense. But traditionally, we are more of an SME market. Your B grade, which has traditionally been our best performer.
Yes.
Your 150, 250 square metre mark, they're the ones that continue to be robust.
Yeah.
We've seen uplift in rentals across all grades, across all segments, contraction in vacancy rates, and a contraction in incentives as well. So I think the shift of the relocation to the Gold Coast, the emergence of a lot of these small businesses, I think the ABS reported 4,400 new businesses have been created.
The new business starts are huge
on the Gold Coast over the last 3 years. 2,500 of that was 21 to 22. So we are growing. We've grown away from being a single industry town to I guess we are benefiting a lot from the growth of southeast Queensland as a whole, but we have proven ourselves in the sense of we can very well have a commercial market down here. Lifestyle has driven that. The relocation of people here, there's a skill force or a workforce per se, and people are calling this home and shifting their industries up here as well.
And you mentioned the rents. Are you seeing the same sort of incentive levels that we're seeing? And the incentives are pretty high across kind of the major CBDs around the country. I'm assuming we're not seeing those sort of levels.
Go in the complete opposite direction.
Yeah,
I think I did a deal just recently, a full floor A grade office space, 10%.
Yeah, awesome.
The equivalent pre-COVID, we would have been 20 to 25% for the same product.
Yeah. And I suppose with what you have in Gold Coast is probably because you just have it's not a massive market, but in terms of supply, not a lot of new supply coming through, not a lot of opportunity, but also that construction cost piece. And I might just bring that back. Well, there isn't much supply in the market, but construction costs has definitely been something that's hit the housing market, as we know, around the country. While your lot supply has reduced, like you said, there's not so much of that greenfield stuff that's selling. But what about the actual, buying the land and then having to develop it? We're seeing some distress in that part of the market. Is it all a little bit slower? Are we seeing that kind of the offerings different to what they were just to cater for that increase in the construction cost, or difficulty in finding a builder?
Yeah, I think it's a sort of a multifaceted issue probably. So I think that there is a lot of pent-up demand still, I think, for product and for buyers on the Gold Coast. However, we're not seeing that translate probably in new development now because of the construction crisis that we're going through, so to speak. So there's probably a lot of developers that are out there sitting on sites at the moment, and they've bought those through various stages pre and during COVID, and they're just not able to deliver those because of the construction cycle that we're currently in. So I think that is going to affect forward supply and potentially have some impact on affordability. What we're seeing probably in a shifting market, the dynamics of the shifting market is we're seeing a move towards build to rent as a focus in some parts of the market, and community housing providers as well, social and affordable housing groups now entering the market in a big way as well. So there's been some institutional funds now taking plays on the Gold Coast, as well as throughout southeast Queensland, but it's good to see some players getting really active on the Gold Coast in those big sectors of the market as well. That's being assisted in part by state government incentives, if you like. So there's some exemptions on foreign investment, there's some exemptions on land tax, and those sort of, I guess, investment levers, if you like, those taxation levers,
and is that
to assist those markets.
And are we seeing that along that corridor as we've seen in the SEQ plan? Yeah,
so that'll look, a lot of that will be focused, if you like, in those, in the higher density areas where you have unlimited height control, or you have an ability to sort of deliver a certain amount of product, I guess, to make it commercially viable. In the community housing market and the build to rent market, government incentive in one way, shape or form is critical, I guess, for those to be commercially viable investments, both for developers, institutional funds, and private groups out there as well. So, but there is a lot of activity in that space, which has been positive. I think that the build to sell market will come back. I think once the construction market starts to, I guess, start to flatten out, to mediate. I don't think we're necessarily going to see prices go backwards, but I think what developers probably need to see is certainty, and probably a little bit of a softening in prices just to sort of help them get out of the ground.
Yeah, like it's definitely it's a massive issue across the country, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because like the cost of raw materials, we've actually seen, well, it hasn't come back, but the level of growth has definitely reduced. But we've got also the issue of labour as well. There's a lot of conflicting projects, particularly in Queensland. Like you said, we've got the Olympics coming up. A lot of investment going to other parts of the state when it comes to construction. So it's a tough time because your vacancies still remain really low for resi housing. But yeah, certainly an interesting time. Just talking about that kind of spine of the Gold Coast, is in that plan we also look at kind of infrastructure by way of, say, the light rail and the extensions of that. How's that going to go with opening up not only residential but kind of commercial precincts, and on that, are we going to see that happen?
Yeah, I think, look, we've obviously had the first 2 stages delivered. Stage 3 of the light rail is now underway, which is from Broadbeach through to Burleigh. I think it's due for completion around 2025. There's a lot of construction along that spine, and that's probably where a lot of the densification is going to be concentrated.
Yeah,
is along that light rail spine as well. Which obviously causes a level of disruption for local businesses and all the rest, but it's all for the future growth of the region and the city, I guess. So so we're seeing a lot of that sort of already happen through the Southport Surfers Paradise up through to Parkwood Precinct. I think the next key will obviously be how does that interlink with eventually the Gold Coast International Airport and the hard rail as well. But yeah, so we're seeing, I think that really shows a city that's maturing and focusing on its key infrastructure to service the population growth as it's outlined in Shaping SEQ and those type of documents and research.
Yeah, so I think that you mentioned Southport. I forgot to actually ask you, Luke, on Southport. There's been a lot of talk about what is actually the CBD. Just heading back to office just for a second. I promise I won't keep you there for very long. But Southport versus kind of Robina Varsity. Where's the CBD? It's like there's a bit of discussion about it. Yeah. Do we want to weigh in, or do we want to just stay nicely on the fence?
I think technically Southport is our CBD.
Yeah.
All the ingredients are there. I feel like the oven's still on preheat.
Okay.
We've got the infrastructure, you've got the amenity, you've got the proximity to your other CBDs as well, Bundle, Surface. You are fundamentally in nice and close to the M1 and all the likes like that as well, but we just haven't been able to get it going yet. In saying that though, we've just looking at the OMR stats earlier as well, we've seen a dramatic uptake on the vacancies in Southport too. So I think its time is certainly coming. But Robina proves to be in key demand for a lot of your. But it's a
different product. Do you know what I mean? Like it's completely different. Floor plates and just offering it is different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Very different. I think Southport's still got a lot to prove. I'm a major supporter of Southport, but it's going to take some time to get going.
And just on that, so in terms of investment activity, so like there's been a couple of office buildings that have sold semi kind of recently. They don't often come along on the Gold Coast market. We know a lot of institutional activity or interest has been in the market, but where have they? I think there was one in Bundle, wasn't there?
Yeah, so the Wyndham building,
yeah,
just recently sold. Corvell sold that. I think that was a 7,900, 7,800 square metre asset that was about 46 or 47 million. I think they transacted that to the Gold Coast City Council, which makes perfect sense because they're one of the largest office occupiers. They are the largest office occupiers on the Gold Coast, and they're right next door anyway. The old, what we call it the Foxtel building, but in Robina there, it was another 10,000 square metre building that just transacted from Centuria over to Exceed Capital. So there's a little bit of movement. I know Alcyon's been a big player out there at Robina as well with their Acuity Business Park, and they've done increasingly well off that, even committing TAFE to a single building on a lease capacity. They've just purchased, I think, the atrium over in Lake Street in Varsity Lakes. I think they saw an opportunity there to wasn't a building that was occupied to what the market would suggest at the minute as well. So I think they saw some opportunity to get in there, reposition some of those leases. It was anchored by some government operations as well, and kind of I guess encourage that flight to quality piece and reposition the building in the market too. So
yeah,
there is an appetite from a lot of those funds. There's been a couple of transactions in Southport that haven't yet been recorded, but I know there's a particular fund that's just acquired another building in there as well. So
wait and see.
Wait and see.
Well, the activity is great. It's just kind of testament to the longevity of this belief in the longevity of a market like Gold Coast. And you mentioned the light rail going down to the airport, which we all know and waiting for to happen. Gold Coast has probably seen, I know neither of you guys are tourism guys, but it kind of seems like I should mention it. Really strong activity in the tourism sector. We've seen kind of the flights in and out of Gold Coast Airport really back up to pre-COVID levels. Occupancy in your in your hotels high. The average room rate's nearly too expensive for a lot of people to holiday. Yeah, are you loving or hating all the tourists on the Gold Coast? Are you allowed to say that?
Oh, look, I think touching on Luke's point before, I mean, we're more than just a lifestyle and holiday destination now, but I think it still is fundamental to the Gold Coast. So I think it is important that, and it's good to see strong tourism numbers back in the coast as well, because that supports and underpins our economy locally.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good to see. Yes, it means it takes longer to drive to here and there and to move around and all the rest of it. But it's just good to see.
You have to share your beach with someone that they don't know what they're doing.
Jump on the light rail.
It's good to see the Gold Coast thriving and everyone coming and enjoying what makes this place really special.
And we've seen a hotel transaction. Was it Sheraton, that sold to the Laundies, I think it was. So private investment into, they know what they're doing. Buying an asset of that size and quality, it's only a good news story for Gold Coast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, interesting time.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the Gold Coast. I love visiting. And do you know what I was saying just the other day? Because they're talking about Disneyland. Like there's a Disneyland option coming to Australia. They're all saying we'll go to Melbourne, but like Melbourne's such a basket case. So like I reckon they should definitely come to Gold Coast and just cement that whole kind of like, amusement park region is just an awesome idea. Yes? You're on board?
Well, the other 4 are there, why not?
Yeah. Are you on board?
Bring
I was
in
spending
Disneyland.
way more time up here than if that was the case. Okay, let's more serious note. Let's kind of touch on industrial. Obviously, the industrial asset class, and that's mentioned within the SEQ shaping document as well. Industrial, the hottest investment class of commercial for a number of years now. Our demand to occupy industrial has been, unlike we've ever seen before. And it's not just kind of the big logistic users either. It's kind of, like you mentioned, all those new businesses that are coming to Gold Coast, all looking for even just, small industrial units. We've seen owner occupiers in particular, particularly strong. Where's that at the moment? I think vacancy still remains pretty low.
Vacancy is almost non-existent.
Okay.
Looking at our industrial teams as well on a leasing capacity, they're getting 3 or 4 offers on leasing stock before they even hit the market, and at rates that almost contest what it was that we've seen in office rates as well. So there's been significant uplift in those rental rates, and that's just purely backed on by very limited supply and increase in demand. What we have seen on the back end of that as well is a lot of your SMSFs, obviously going into that owner-occupier market. We are predominantly strata-led in industrial region as well. So there's been a massive emergence of first new entrants into the market, purchasing these industrial units in their SMSF and then leasing it back to their businesses, your tradies, your chippies, your Sparkies, everything.
Well, I
like
suppose with that is because there has been like really strong rental growth. They're just looking to shelter from that. You know what I mean? And like that's a sensible thing to do. And it's hard to find there's very limited stock out there.
And that's where interest rates where they were.
Yeah.
There was a significant portion of the market that went out there and maximised that opportunity.
But that's still continuing if they can find one. There's still activity in that space.
We've seen a massive shift, even just traditional occupiers on a tenant basis going, look, we can't secure our next 5-year location. We're going to have to look into purchasing now.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to take that risk if we need 200 square metres, we're going to have to look at 300 or 400 metres and plan what that growth.
So do you think that despite the fact that we were talking about construction costs and that being high, still difficult to source trades and actually just that cost of goods, given that there is that kind of underlying demand, it's hard because resi there's plenty of demand as well, but is it more likely we're going to see some industrial stock coming to market, or is it it will be very if there's a commitment in place, we will see that kind of construction take place, and we're not seeing any spec industrial.
No, it's
the Gold Coast.
Throw some tilt slabs up and a couple of power points and you're good to go.
Yeah. So easy.
Yeah, I think it's a very low risk manoeuvre from a lot of the guys that do work in that arena.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is just more or less finding the land to be able to do those developments. Burley's obviously very hot to trot, but that Burley, Reedy Creek, Varsity Lakes
I think it's
precinct is non-existent in terms
it's
of...
more like we're heading further north. I think that the plan has it extended up north closer towards Logan. But yeah, we'll see. We've already seen a lot of development obviously in Yatala and the surrounds, and that will, where there is a spot, it will continue to be developed where there is a spot. Yeah, certainly. So what's some of the key takeaways? So I'm really curious to see what happens. The shaping document is out for exhibition, for discussion. We'll continue to, we're just going to, it's just a really good news story that they're planning for the future. Like you said, those population numbers are pretty significant, and we need to find somewhere for people not only just to live, but the medical piece, the employment piece as well. What do you hope to see come out for Gold Coast in the next little while? I'm not going to put a date on it.
Look, I mean, I think it's just, building on what we have here. So it's just, building on the infrastructure that's already in place. I mean, there's already, some significant projects that are sort of underway on the Gold Coast. So I think we have all the recipes to sort of keep going in terms of a world-class city, and particularly a statement for people that are coming from overseas to see the Gold Coast as a place not only to sort of play but also to live and to work. So I think that the work that we're doing on the Gold Coast is all leading in the right direction. The challenges of the Shaping SEQ document is that we have lofty expectations in terms of where our population growth is going to come from. But I think that the challenge will be is to accommodate that growth and to accommodate not just that in the context of the housing crisis, but also address this affordability issue as well. So I think that that's probably going to be the big challenge, I think, for not just the Gold Coast, but other government areas throughout southeast Queensland moving forward, I think, because they've provided very little new greenfield land, so a lot of that land is going to be, on the Gold Coast that is in particular, so a lot of it is consolidation. So when is the market going to be back to be able to deliver more medium to high-rise density product to be able to cater for that demand, and what does it look like? It'll be really interesting to pen out because there's no lack of demand out there. And from what we're hearing, you know, product, everything from really high-end product to even the more affordable product is selling really well. It's just about getting it to market from developers' point of view.
And that's it. And those developers that are holding on to those land parcels and stuff, they want to develop. They're just waiting for that
for the economics to work. So that's right. But look, generally very excited. You know, I feel very privileged to live here on the coast and to work between the two cities of the Gold Coast and Brisbane. And it's an exciting time ahead, I think.
And maybe do that. How about you, Luke? What's your thoughts on the office market? Can we continue it being this low in terms of vacancy and occupancy?
Well, look, absolutely. There's no new projects expected to come out of the ground post the end of this year, so 2024 looks very barren in the sense of new supply, and that's very heavily driven by the cost of construction. They're going to need to be justified by an increase in rental rates, and whilst we have had a good run, though the uplift in rental just isn't strong enough to justify a lot of these bigger projects getting out of the ground yet. But we'd love to see another prime grade 10,000 square metre building in Southport, hopefully, to really get it going. But it is that there is such a strong element of risk to that. Whilst the data says that there is a demand, it's being able to justify it on that rental basis for these tenants to come in and still be wanting to be here on the Gold Coast and really get the businesses here as well.
That older stock or the B grade or C grade stock kind of come out of the market, refurb, like spec up.
And we're seeing a lot of that. We have seen that over recent years and more or less recently as well. Obviously, flight to quality is a big topic around the country, and it's prudent even just on your larger freehold buildings right down to your smaller mum and dad invested strata title tenancies. We're going in, recarpet, repaint, LED lights, let's make it look a little bit prettier, and you are getting immediate uplift. But I think the biggest challenge for us is navigating that cost piece, and we really need to. Difficulties around us being such a fragmented city, we're so linear. We have lots of different office cores, but nobody's really dominating on that CBD basis. So I think somebody needs to come out on top and have a key focus on that business growth within the centre as well, and the city as well.
And industrial, you still feel strongly about industrial, that will just keep on ticking along. Demand will stay there. We didn't actually mention retail, and this will be my last point that I make, and I'm just going to jump at retail too, particularly because we talked about the tourism piece. How's retail going, particularly like, you know, the Surface and Broadbeach, those kind of strips?
Look, I've seen things recently being leased in Surface that have been sitting there dormant for 10 years.
Awesome.
So if you're looking for a good sign or a good story, that's absolutely it. The growth, the tourism numbers, there's more people on the ground, there's more people spending money. Yes, the cost of staying at a hotel has increased immensely. There was a lot of time that a lot of people weren't able to travel overseas, and I think a lot of that economy has been directed to here, to southeast Queensland, to the Gold Coast, and we've seen the emergences. I mean, Nobby's is going red hot. Burleigh's always been red hot, but your Palm Beach has come alive. Your Currumbin, there's people are going outside of the standard Surface Broadbeach, F&B markets or your hospo markets, and it's just that so many creative culinary offerings out there.
Absolutely, all those markets. It's not just Surface anymore. It's all over the place. It's such a great place to come up here. I really enjoy my time up here. But anyway, I think I will end on that note. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to Matt and to Luke talking all things Gold Coast. I'm just, you've probably seen a lot of stuff that I'm always talking up the office market in Gold Coast, so great to chat to Luke about it. But thanks so much for everyone joining us, and we'll see you next time on our next Between the Lines Live. Thank you.